let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, fetism, and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming to the show for the first time. Today we have a special guest. We've got David.
Hello.
Hey David, how are you doing, baby? You all right?
I am soft, suppled, and highly blessed, I guess. How are you guys?
We love to hear it. Look, we're good. We're good. I'm good. It's 2023 officially. We're plodding along, singing a song, walking in a post-pandemic wonderland, and honestly, just kind of hoping that World War III don't start up anytime soon because I'm fat,
You're right.
I'm tired, and I don't have the energy to fight. You know, I just want to sleep.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, we have fat armor, but I don't want to have to use it.
No, absolutely. I have insulation for like a lovely warm house. You know, I don't have padding to like absorb bullet fragments, you know, like that's not what I
Yeah,
want.
no.
But you know, speaking of being padded, you are quite well padded, David. And you know, kind of into today's theme, you've been relatively substantially padded for the majority of your life. Is that right?
Yes, very much so. Basically, since I was like 2, 3 years old, I've been fat.
There you go. And listen, that's the theme of today because, you know, it's something that we were talking about and you actually reached out to us to say this. You know, a lot of the people we have on the pod, much like Tim and myself, were born slender, grew up thin, and it's only really through the advent of gaining that we have experienced what it is to be fat to an extent. And I think there is an importance in exploring what it is like to be a gainer, but also having grown up fat, where we're not stupid. We know that people are treated harshly being fat kids. So that's kind of what we're going to be exploring today. So before we kick things off, David, are you ready?
I am. Let's do this.
Well, okay. So listen, you said you've been fat since you were about 2 or 3 years old. But as we know, fat is a little bit of an objective statement of being, right? Especially when you're talking about kids, like leave kids alone for fuck's sake.
Right.
But what age were you when you first understood that you were what was considered fat?
See, it's kind of complicated because, I mean, in a way, I always understood that I was fat. I mean, I think about like the stuff that I would enjoy when I was very little, and it was like I liked Winnie the Pooh, I liked Barney the dinosaur, and these are like fat icons. I mean, and I was going through the world thinking, oh yeah, I am Winnie the Pooh. So I knew that I was fat, but I thought of it as like a really cool thing. And it was until I was like about 6, that I was diagnosed with a condition called osteochondritis. Basically what it is, it's like, well, I have it on my femur. And so in layman's terms, it's like the bone is soft. And so it is especially like sensitive to impact and stuff of the sort. And so when I was diagnosed with that, obviously, like I was taken to the doctors, and what was the first thing that I was told? That I needed to lose weight. And that's when I first felt like society's perception of, oh, this is a problem.
So that diagnosis that you got, there was like nothing that they could have done. They couldn't somehow introduce more calcium into your system. Like, was this something that was genetic that could not be in any way undone? Or have you since found out that there were other therapies they could have tried?
Well, basically, like the big thing that happened, and obviously it part of the whole trauma growing up was that like I had to wear this prosthetic part on my leg, which was basically like this whole thing that was like, there to prevent impact.
Yeah.
And so I wore that throughout, like, I want to say until I was like maybe 9 years old. And so that was like a thing. Obviously, like, exercise was obviously recommended, but it was like I could only do swimming because of impact. So, like, there was some treatment, but it was just very, like, rigid in a way.
Hmm.
That makes sense. And I feel like this really kicks off a conversation that, we want to have more of as we have the chance to speak to more people who've grown up fat. Because, look, we can infer till the cows come home, but the truth is we know that fat kids are not treated well, either by
Hmm.
their peers or by doctors or by parents. The amount of people in the fat lib space who have a lot of trauma around dieting and around chronic illness that either was present before and people just didn't notice because they were like, oh, you're fat, that's the problem, or
Hmm.
chronic illness that came about as a result of yo-yo dieting, which is a very, very big thing. So I do just want to take a moment here, to just sit with what you've shared with us already, David, because ultimately what we're talking about is not simply just, oh, moments that occur in the world, it happens, life happens. This is something very intentional by people to a child. And this is where my heart breaks because as someone who didn't grow up fat, I still saw people get treated that way. And
Yeah.
I was probably complicit in the bullying of other kids, either by not saying something or by joining in chanting at some stage of my childhood, things I don't remember because they were incidental, but no doubt sit with people because you don't forget trauma. So I don't know. I sometimes think in the gainer community, when we talk about, yeah, dealing with doctors, yeah, I'm getting fat and I have health problems, yeah, there's this, that, we're so quick to talk about how horny it makes us. And we're very slow to understand that there are people much like yourself who are recovering and healing from very genuine trauma in relation to these things that are actually quite big, especially when it comes to kids. So, listeners, take note, give space, listen, and learn. Um, as a kind of follow up to that, I want to ask, what was your experience with food growing up compared to what you observed with members of your family or your peers at school? What was that like? What was the difference that you saw?
Well, within my family, all of my family was fat as I was growing up. You know, just habits of the system, and I would end up, being fat like them too. My parents actually ran a restaurant. So it was like this whole thing of, on the one hand, there's this big love for food in the home, and yet at the same time, it's like, oh, we're fat because of this. And so it was like very rough, the relationship with food. I mean, we were constantly like dieting. I like basically throughout all my growing years, I was in some form of diet. And yet in a way too, it was like, I don't know, I I joke about it in my head now that like my mom was my first feeder. Because it was like the most, like, she would have cravings like all the time, and we would always crave like the same things. Um, and it's like she would get home, and she would be like, "Oh, I like I thought of this on the way home. Like, here's a pizza, or here's cake, or whatever." Um, and so, it was like part of that same whole thing, that it was like, on the one hand is taking me to diets and doing these things, and on the other hand is, here's cake. Um, and I mean, when it came to my peers, it was actually when, like, I noticed the big differences. Like in my school, well, I grew up basically in like private, like Catholic high school, and I mean, there's a whole slew of trauma to that, as you all know. Um,
Girl, I know. I've been through the same damn thing. I
yeah,
fortunately I
no.
switched back to public school midway through high school, but like from kindergarten to freshman year, all parochial school, and good God, ugh.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't escape it. Like, I was there all the way through high school. And I mean, it was, since it was like a smaller class, it was like obviously everybody knows each other. It's very interconnected, and there isn't necessarily that much diversity. Like, I was basically one of three fat kids in in like our class, and when it's like so small, it's like you constantly feel like there's like a big lens over you of like, oh, you are like specially different in this context, and like, yeah, it would end up being very uncomfortable and very just like I I would just not feel safe at school, really.
So something I actually want to circle back to, you had mentioned, like as a bit of a joke, that you say, as a joke, your mum was your first feeder. But for listeners, David, you are a Latine person, correct?
Yes.
So something I think that we hear a lot from guests who have been from different ethnic backgrounds, especially from immigrant backgrounds as well, is that there is this like parental thing where like they're like, "Oh, you haven't eaten, please eat." There's a joke by Atsuka who just had an HBO special. She's so funny, and she tells like, because of these Japanese parents, and they're like, "Do you eat? Eat! Oh, please eat! You want to see? Eat!" And this goes on for like a minute, and then she pauses, and everyone laughs, and she says, "And the next time you see them, they call you fat." Like, this is such a thing for so many people. There's like so many cultures where like food is the center, it's the hearth, it's the home, and mothers especially grow up being like, I feed my child, I give them sustenance, and they grow. This is my major contribution to their life. But also, they still live in a capitalistic Western society, which is majorly fatphobic, which says your fat child is bad and wrong. So they are constantly at war with the whole, like, I must feed you because that is my duty as the mother or as the parent, but also I must critique you for being fat, which I can imagine is a trauma. So, listeners, I just want to again reference this. If you are any kind of racial diversity, immigrant status, anything like that, and you think to yourself, you experience this weird dichotomy with your parents, your family in relation to food and weight and size and health, you are not alone. This is extremely common, and we need to have more conversations about it. So, in a way, it does not surprise me that you would have that image of like, my mother is my first feeder, because in many ways, that's the role that that parent enacts in. And I do sometimes wonder to myself, for those of us in the community who experience a desire to be fed, how many of us first became aware of a desire to be fed because of the attitudes our parents had when it came to this caring, nurturing desire to feed. Not in any kind of Oedipus conflation. We're not doing that here, kids. I'm just saying, we pick up what we like from all sorts of random places. Fuck, we all figured out we liked fatties by watching Homer Simpson on TV. You know what I'm saying? It's like we ain't casting aspersions on where we get horny from when we were like 13 years old going, I wonder why I like this so much. Like, we ain't doing the judgment, kids. I'm just saying. Get it from all sorts of places. I do want to ask, and I wonder how this will be for you, because as you said, you wore a brace until you were 9 because you had this sense of illness. Do you know from memory if that was classified as a form of disability because you had to wear a physical aid?
Yes. Like, in PE, for example, is where I felt it the most. Where it was like they would put the other kids to like run laps or do these things, and I would be sidelined and I would just basically have to sit down. And I mean, it just fed into this thing of, oh yeah, the fat kid is just gonna sit through PE, okay, like, and yeah, it lended itself to more bullying, and
Yeah.
I can imagine.
I wanna ask, you experience that from an early age, this intersection of being in a larger body, in a body that, is being treated with disability. How did you see other kids' bodies compared to your own? And what was that kind of language like? As in, what kind of words might you have used to describe your other classmates versus words you would use to describe yourself?
Well, the thing is, I mean, obviously, like since I was very little, like I had this like appreciation for fat. Like before being diagnosed with this, like I was fat and I was living and like I was happy with it. Like in a way, I all my issues with being fat was more so due to how other people would treat me than the way that I would treat myself. But in the long run, though, that does end up, really altering the self-talk. I mean, it was like this thing of, oh shit, my body is wrong. Oh shit, I am not welcome here. I do not fit in this way. And I mean, just being in dieting and having to like I was constantly in swimming for exercise and the thing was always like, oh, you need to do this to lose weight. You need to um do these things to like change yourself. And so basically the message of growing up was always, oh, apparently my body is wrong and I need to do something about it.
So I do want to speak a little bit. Well, sorry. I do want to ask here about impact because I think this is ultimately one of those things that even outside of this podcast, nobody talks about because we are all out here as former thin people wanting to be fat, enjoying being called pigs, enjoying being called nicknames that are typically attributed to fat people, and we get off to it because it for us is edification that the impact is working. I am becoming fat. It is a fulfillment of what I am trying to do. But how many people have turned around and said very sternly, do not call me that. That is a trigger for me. That is what I was called in my youth. That is abusive to me. Don't do that. So I want to talk and ask a little bit about impact. And you say how you liked fat from a young age, but after a certain point, it began to really get to you. What age were you when you felt like the words of others started to become a narrative that you spoke about yourself?
I think it must have been around when I was like 10. When I was 10, that's when I like hit puberty, and that's when I um like realized that I, you know, liked men. And obviously being in this like Catholic school context, that was even like another layer to the whole thing of, oh, I am wrong. I am like I have to hide these things about myself. And yeah, I mean, like it was basically something that I had to carry all the way through like 18, 19 when I graduated from high school. Like it was just being in that context was really toxic and really damaging to me.
And if I can ask, how old are you now?
I am 23 right now.
So you were diagnosed with this bone thing around, I think you said 5 or 6, is that right?
Yeah, 6.
Within 4 years, the treatment of other people meant that you no longer started talking to yourself in positive terms, you started speaking negatively. That then maintained itself for a good another decade, and you've only really been out of that environment for the last 4 years.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, again, I want to take a moment here and labor on this for listeners. The numbers are no joke. And for many of us, we can easily put high school and negative experiences to the far-flung regions of the past. But in a simple numbers game, that past is still extremely recent. And trauma takes time to heal and to recover from. And again, that breaks my heart to hear because considering how much love and adoration we each have for gaining and for fatness, considering how much joy we love to talk about on this podcast that it has brought us and that it brings other people, it breaks my heart to reflect on instances for people where it brought them pain and it brought hurt. And I am so sorry that that happened for you. And for listeners out there, if this is your story, please know that we want to hear it. We want to, and we need to, because we in the community need to stop prioritizing sex as our main focus all the time, and we need to give space to conversations like these, because this is where healing comes in. This is where gaining can be healing for people, and we need to be prepared to do that.
Yeah, and I completely agree. As a community, we need to realize that, the sexual part of it is not the most important part. We are all people, and we have all been through things. And when we lose sight of that and we see it as just an image on a screen or a fantasy in our heads, we forget that real people get caught up into real life trauma.
Yeah.
And we do a great disservice to those community members when we just gloss over it and are like, oh yeah, but I don't really care about all that. I just want to see your belly. Like, come on.
Yeah.
100%. And we've said this about the podcast from the beginning. Why do you plan so many episodes? Oh, well, that's easy. To gain is to become fat. And to be fat means to live your life in a fat body. 100% of all things that exist that humans know, see, think, feel, and do occur in bodies that are alive. Therefore, we have an infinite number of episodes we can talk about in which you can be fat, because it influences and touches on every single cornerstone of humanity. So therefore, how many times can we talk about sex? A number. But how many more things are there to talk about than sex? A far greater number. And we need to be prepared to have those conversations, to listen to people, and to give space. So I do want to ask David, before we move on to the next section, is there an element that you haven't necessarily shared with us yet about that time in your life in this region of trauma that you've had to experience that you think could be pertinent to the listeners?
Well, I mean, really the thing is, being fat and growing up fat, I mean, especially being, when we're growing up, we're all vulnerable. We're all like not necessarily gonna protect ourselves too well mentally. I mean, and I feel like the things that people could tell me now don't necessarily affect me as much as, they obviously did back then. And I don't know, like I think about it, and it's like, for example, the education system, when talking about health, a lot of it is very like uh, centered in, oh, obesity is wrong, like we need to avoid this, we need to do this, like do everything to prevent this. And when it was like those things came up at school, I always felt like everybody turned to look at me, and I'm like, don't. um and really, I mean, thinking about the lasting impact and how these traumas have like, I still deal with some of these things. I mean, really, growing up this way like damaged my relationship with health, with food, with exercise, and with my own body. um like, I don't know, I think about the, trying food, like new food, and like exercising. I really wish that the discourse around everything had been more so of, oh, we need to, like, you need to do this to feel good, you need to do this to be healthy, to, grow up well, all these things. But it was always just about weight. And I mean, even to this day, as much as I have healed already, it's like I I have this thing with food where it's like, in the back of my head, there's always like this voice of, oh, this thing is gonna do this to you. This thing is gonna make you fatter. This thing is gonna make you thinner. And I mean, it's really annoying. And then with working out, it's like, I genuinely love working out. I love movement. I love exercise. I love, like, it does wonders for my mental health.
Yeah.
And yet, there's always this voice in the back of my head of like, oh, you're doing this to change yourself, you're doing this to look better, and I mean, right now, like, I'm starting to dabble a bit into muscle gaining, and so like, in a way, that voice has resurfaced, even if a bit differently. But I just wish that, like, I didn't have this mysticism about all these things. I wish I could just, like, do these choices, like work out, dance, whatever, just for the hell of it, and not always have that, like, those thoughts in the back of my head.
There needs to be a real shift in the way that we handle education towards the young, concerning like. So I think James and I, we've talked about this before on the podcast, but a shift away from like what is quote unquote health and focus more on wellness.
Mhm.
Wellness is going to encompass everything. It's going to be, your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. Wellness should be more important than how much you weigh, what your BMI is, any of that stuff.
I don't disagree, but I do want to offer up caution to that because a lot of, and Weight Watchers is a great example of this. They've rebranded recently to being a wellness program. But if you look at what they're offering, the food packages and everything else, it still comes down to weight loss and beauty. So I don't disagree, but there still needs to be a tempering that we focus on when it comes to anything to do with food and diet and wellness culture. I want to ask you to tell us about the journey from where that was 18, 19, when you stepped out of schooling and were in that world. Tell me about the journey from there to making the decision to actively and intentionally gain weight.
We're about to get a little bit darker.
Ah,
So I guess content warning for anybody listening. There's some eating disorder stuff coming up ahead. So basically, my journey, I mean, and also strap in because this is a long and complicated ride. um, I mean, I realized that I liked fat men when I was 10 years old. Um, it's kind of funny looking back because I don't remember what episode it was. Like my favorite show at this age was iCarly. And I don't know. I don't remember exactly the quote. I've tried looking for it. I can't find it. Honestly, with everything that has come out about like, with Jeanette McCurdy, I'm like kind of don't really want to watch it again because I feel like that's going to taint a lot of um my formative years. But I remember something vaguely about them describing like a fat person in a very positive light, but also kind of like amused being of like, oh, this jiggles like a bag of jello or something like that. And that kind of just triggered a fascination with fat in my own body. And it just started going from there. I mean, the Nickelodeon to kink pipeline is bizarre and a little bit concerning, but it's very real. And I mean, yeah, like before I even like knew what porn truly was, I found myself like looking up on YouTube like fat men jiggling and fat men doing these things, and that's how I came across like um gainer stuff on YouTube, and that's how I became aware of this. So, I mean, I grew up enjoying all these like gainers and watching all these things, but I was also dealing with like fat phobia in my life. I mean, it was like I would go to the Weight Watchers meeting and then immediately go out, like get out of it, go home, lock myself in my room and watch gainer stuff.
And how old were you when you were going to these Weight Watchers meetings?
I I mean, we last, oh God, like the first time that, because we joined Weight Watchers and dropped off like several times. The first time when I was 10.
10 years old
So
and at a Weight Watchers meeting?
it
See, that
was,
just does not seem like appropriate to me. Like to hear that, I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong because I didn't ever have to go to a Weight Watchers meeting or was never like, I've never experienced this, but I would feel like if the team leader or whoever is holding the meeting saw a child there, they'd be like, why is your kid here? This is your
oh
kid. Like,
no.
why is your kid
Oh
here?
no, they encouraged like
yeah.
That
they
seems
even
so
were
fucked
like
up.
to the people that were just there, like adults, they were like, "Oh, if you have kids, bring them. Like this is good healthy stuff that all your children should learn."
Oh my
Uh
God. No, this seems
No.
so like insidious.
Yes.
yeah.
No. Listen. I know I talk about this all the time, but people listen. Listen to the Maintenance Face podcast. Listen to these other podcasts. Fat people talking about fat experiences. This is not that uncommon, which is horrifying. But this is also what we mean. Like, because I know we talk about, like, the insidious nature of systemic fat phobia, which affects everyone. And I feel like some people probably listen to that and they're like, yeah, sure, whatever, that's not a real thing. No, bitch, it's an entirely real thing. People are out here trying to encourage all sorts of fucking bullshit. It is wild. Like, ugh. Anyways, apologies. David, continue.
No, yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, Weight Watchers are the whole thing in and of itself. But yeah, I mean, as I've mentioned before, like my teen years were just plagued with dieting, yo-yoing, like swimming, working out for losing weight, all these things. Eventually, when I graduated, and I was like 19 when uh, I started posting like nudes on Twitter. I started like sexting on like kick groups, um, and I very immediately gravitated towards like gainer circles, but I did so still under the delusion of, oh, I'm gonna lose weight. I need to lose weight. I need to do this. And since I was fat, I fit right into gainer circles. Like, it was like I didn't necessarily need to prove to anybody that I was like what I was doing. But it just kept building up for like this cognitive dissonance within me of what I truly want versus what I've been made to believe that I should want. And when I started college, it's when like I ended up like like taking up some very concerning behavior around food. Um, I mean, left to my own devices, like going off, living on my own, I, I mean, I was just all over the place. And during like my first semester, I would just like stop eating altogether. Like there would be days where I would just like go to school starving myself. And I mean, really, what I had noticed up to this point, it, I mean, really, yo-yo dieting fucks up your metabolism. Like, I, up to this point in my life, every single time that there was like Christmas or a season like that, where it was like a lot more food, less like, like trying to control it, it would always be this thing of like, I would put on like 10 pounds in a week. um, and I mean, obviously, with everything that was in the environment, that was always very concerning and traumatizing. And I would get everybody on my case. And yeah, I mean, it was just bad. However, the pandemic hit during my second semester of college. And so we were sent home, obviously. And this period to me, it was actually really, really helpful because being stuck at home, bored out of my mind, um, was when I finally decided to like give in and try two particular things that I was like aware of and very curious about, but I had never like, gone into them. And ultimately, these would be like the two things that would set me in the path of healing. And as strange as these two things might sound, those things were Grommr and poppers.
Poppers? Wait.
Poppers.
Pop. Right in front of my salad? I mean, what? Girl.
Yeah.
Girl, okay, wait. Okay, that's taking me right out. I'm gonna need Grommr makes sense? I'm gonna need you to walk me through the poppers real quick. Like, walk me through it, baby. Walk me through that.
I will say, Grommr helped me reconcile my fatness with the exterior. Poppers really helped me reconcile with it for myself. I encountered this genre of porn videos called poppers trainers, For basically people that are not familiar with the world of poppers, poppers trainers are basically like these high energy compilations of porny stuff. And, ever so often it will be like, take a hit. And yes, there's exactly the Gaynor themed ones, which they would also include like, like take a hit and now chug something, or take a hit and rub your belly. And like, in the intensity of it all, it like helped me really like give in to the pleasure of my fatness. During these hits, all the hangups would disappear, and it's just fat and pleasure.
Because you get
And
that rush of euphoria, and then you
yes.
associate the euphoria with the image on screen or the feeling that you're feeling. And like, I know exactly which
Mhm.
one you're talking about. And like, as a person who's used them for years, I've also used them during stuffing sessions to like help me
Oh
like
yeah.
get past that feeling of being too full, because they relax smooth muscle. And your stomach
Hmm.
being a smooth muscle, you take a hit and it relaxes, and suddenly you don't feel so queasy anymore. I mean, it's like an amazing tool for
Yes. I spent most of 2020 like, stuffing myself for other people, doing poppers. I was thriving. Then 2021 happened. And in January, my mom died. And she died from COVID.
Oh, babe.
And I just went into this insane depression. Like, she was my best friend. In this, like, big depression, I turned to kind of pretty unsafe sexual practices to cope. And this extended to gainer things. I mean, like, in the sexual world, like, I would have unprotected sex with total strangers. And in the gainer stuff, it was like this thing where I would starve myself still, and then at night stuff myself for people. But like, it became like so obsessive, and it went to like a whole other extreme. I think having like, starving myself to do this was like definitely what sealed it as such a like unhealthy thing. And at the intensity that I started doing it, it got to this point where one day I got like really sick in the middle of it, and I threw up. And that was a major wake up slap. After this, I said, you know what? No, I need to figure myself out. I need to get my bearings, figure out what the fuck I'm doing, because this is not the right way to do anything. And so I stopped stuffing myself for other people. Like, I just said, okay, I need to pause this. But I also stopped starving myself, which ultimately I think was the best thing that I could have done. I started gaining a little bit of weight. I had, like, now that I was eating like a normal person, of course, I would get back to filling up a little bit. I mean, obviously, in the depression of it all, like, there were days where I just wouldn't have any appetite. There were days where I wanted to eat everything, because that's what depression is like. But it was during this time where I just said, okay, no, I need to put a pause to any gainer ideas. I need to put a pause to any like weight loss ideas too. I just need to focus on, healing, on like getting my bearings, like figuring out how to move forward from this. By doing that, I ended up getting like a much clearer state of mind. And like several months passed, and while being in this better, clearer state, that's where I met the man that is now my husband. Meeting him, like, I've always thought of it that like he is like the angel that my mom sent me. Oh my god, I'm tearing up. I have you guys had people cry on your on the podcast before?
There's a first time for everything, honey. There's a first time for everything. And I just wanted to just say real quick, our deepest condolences go out to you, because I can't imagine going through something like that. That's to lose someone who means that much to you. It's like, I lost my husband. We weren't together at the time, so it was a little bit different for me. Like, my grief processed in a much different way. But to like lose a parent is just one of the worst possible things that can happen to you.
Yeah, but hey, fortunately, when my husband gets into the picture, everything becomes a lot better. Like, I mean, really, with him, for the first time since I was a kid, I felt like genuinely safe in me, in life, in everything. And what helped a lot was that he was a gainer too. Well, he is a gainer too. It was definitely like he eased a lot of my like concerns and worries. Now, an interesting thing about gaining for me, like taking that decision, diet like yo-yo dieting my entire life fucked up my metabolism. So, whereas for a lot of other people, the decision to gain is like, I'm gonna start stuffing myself. I'm gonna start like, doing all these things, gainer shakes, whatever, like putting like a lot of effort into it. For me, the decision to gain was just accepting and embracing my natural instinct and my natural appetite for everything, really. And I mean, it worked. Like within like our first 2 months as boyfriends, I put on like 15 pounds. I mean, seeing that amount of weight gain, like it did freak me out a lot in the moment. Like, I mean, because again, it's just the entire trauma that I had been carrying through my entire life. But I mean, being with my husband helped a lot. Um, because really we helped each other a lot through our trauma. And now, for the first time, having somebody in my life that I could like talk and, just strip down and be like, okay, this is the shit that's happening. I want to gain, but I have these things, like these hangups. Um, like it was like I didn't feel alone anymore, and I could process this. And I mean, it helped too because he also grew up fat, so we had like a lot of like common trauma and things that we could help. Um, I mean, like it helps a lot that he is a therapist, so he has like all the tools in his wheelhouse to, you know, deal with these things, and like it helped a lot. And I mean, yeah, like I like being together, like I mean, I can say now that I'm in a much better place. And yeah, I mean, here I am, having gained like 60 pounds since I met him, and I'm fat, blessed, and highly favored.
So just quickly touching then, can you give us a comparison? Like, how has your perspective on your body shifted from the start of that journey to where you're at now?
Oh, it's night and day. I mean, I have come so far in loving my body and like enjoying where I'm at, and I feel like I can finally um really take like the reins in a way of my body and my gaining journey. I mean, I I feel like I'm starting to plateau. And so I'm excited because it means that now I'll actually have to put an effort to gain, and there's a lot of fun things about it. Like I mean, I'm excited to like reclaim like the chugging and the stuffing and all those things. Um
That's awesome.
and, yeah, and I mean, yeah, like I'm like I look in the mirror now and I'm like I love what I see. And I mean, I have hangups still. Like obviously 2 years of good stuff are not gonna like get rid of 20 years of trauma. Um but I mean, I have gone through a lot, and ultimately I can say that it gets better.
I fucking men. You didn't even hear it from the butter queen this time, bitches. You heard it from the other fat. It gets butter, and it gets good, done it too. God damn it. I do want to ask something that maybe is a little bit of a tricky question, because as you say, trauma is not so long ago. And as a fat person, you still exist in a world where people will make comments, cast aspersions, try to make you feel a certain type of way because you are fat. But you want to gain and you want to grow. How do you balance that best for yourself to protect your heart and to protect your healing and your growth, both physical and emotional, mental? whilst dealing with all of that, what do you do?
So I mean, when I think about like my those moments where I'm like, oh shit, what is happening? Like, what am I doing to myself? Like those anxieties, I would I would categorize them into two camps. There are my anxieties about health and my anxieties about other people's views. So when it comes to my anxieties about health, I feel like those are probably the ones that are the most based at this point. Because I mean, I do have to admit that in my gaming journey so far, like health has definitely taken a backseat, and it doesn't help that like in my family I have like history of diabetes and health problems and stuff. So it's like something that I'm always kind of like aware of. Oh, this is really fun, but I don't want to think about going to a doctor. I don't want to think of getting my blood work done and stuff. And I mean, I know that I need to be a lot better about it. Like that's that's just the truth of it all. Like I honestly, that is like one of my biggest goals this year. It's to like really take the reins of my health, because I think at the end of the day, I've noticed that for me, I am very pragmatic in my mental health and dealing with these things, and so it's like, how will I be okay? How will I silence these anxieties about health? Is by taking control of my health. Like really, no other way around it. I mean, um, and and like I'm thinking of like ways to be better about it. I mean, muscle gaining has definitely been like a thing that I want to do, and it's like kind of giving it a fun twist, but really at the end of the day, it's something that I say to be like, okay, I'll exercise more, I'll put on muscle, I'll do these things, and like I'm also trying to figure out like good ways to gain healthily and be a lot more in control of that part. Now, the other camp of my anxieties, the where it revolves around the opinions of other people, this is where I still struggle. I mean, I am very socially anxious. I am people pleasing, and I am non-confrontational. So, like, I am just constantly anxious about like what other people will say. And I mean, obviously, it makes sense because growing up, people would always just give me shit. It is really interesting to me though that in like despite in the last 2 years putting on 80 pounds, I still have yet to hear a peep about it from anybody in my life. Um, I don't know if that's just like a thing from growing up fat. It's like people just conceive you as a fat person, so it's like they don't necessarily notice if you gain. If you gain, I mean, to a point, I would say, but like you know, I just like it's still a thing that gives me anxiety, and I think ultimately for fighting those things about people's opinions, it's really just a thing of building yourself up and surrounding yourself with people who build you up. I mean, it's a thing of enjoying life, being happy, and dress yourself up nicely, take pictures of yourself. Like it is really important not to lose touch with the things that you love about yourself and that you love about gaming, because I mean, if you hold on to that love, nobody can tell you shit.
Yeah. I feel like we've touched on a similar point before, and I think this is about events, right? We said along the lines of, yes, there needs to be something said about having events in your local space, meeting up with people, making friends, but there reaches a certain point where it's like, I live in the middle of nowhere and there's no events around me. You need to go to other people. You need to put in the effort because it's clearly not happening for you. You need to go and do the thing. Like, yes, we always want to substantiate that there are things that you can do to mitigate the comments of other people and to facilitate situations where you don't have to engage, etc., etc. But there really comes down to a point of there really is nothing quite like loving on yourself and prioritizing your own mental health, building your own self up so that when other people come, they ain't got nothing to stand on. So I think that's a really, really crucial point. And similarly about health. We all have our concerns and fears. A lot of us don't like going to the doctor because of our anxieties, but at the end of the day, if you want to know that your health is being taken care of, take the time to go to a doctor and oblige yourself to do it for your own benefit, because simply by going to the doctor, you take away that fear and anxiety that is looming over you. So I think that that's an absolute cracking bit of knowledge there, David. Thank you for sharing that with the listeners. When it comes to the community at large, you've shared with us so graciously so much of your story today, and I just want to ask, as a generic, blanket statement of everyone, do you feel like the community has a good understanding of like respect and conversation when it comes to stories like yours? Or perhaps is the community a little bit insensitive towards people who share your story?
I would say it honestly varies. Like some people do, some people don't.
Yeah.
It's I think it's a really big thing of like, from what I've noticed, I can't really think of any gainers off the top of my head that started fat, you know? And I mean, other than myself and my husband, but I feel like it is a little bit foreign, still to a lot of people. And there is something to be said about skinny privilege. And there's some of us who have never known that. There's some of us who have never known what it's like to feel like we can be conventionally attractive, feel like we can just go to a doctor and not, get shit. There is a lot of trauma. One thing that I have definitely noticed in myself is that the more that I've healed, the more that I've gotten turned off by like the more degrading talk and encouraging and stuff,
Yeah.
because I'm just like, I don't know. I didn't go through all this journey and all this healing just to, you know,
Just to jump right back into the sharks, like,
yeah. And I
yeah.
mean, I'm not gonna yuck other people's yum. I mean, I enjoyed that in my day, and I feel like, there's definitely a kind of person that is for. I mean, for those among us who have never had like this fat trauma, like, that I can definitely see how that's appealing in that way. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's just kind of like recognizing that everybody has their own story and their own trauma. I feel like as gainers, sometimes we can be very self-centered to a point. Because really, I mean, it's a thing about like, I am growing my body, I am enjoying what I'm seeing, I'm enjoying my fat. But I think it's also very important to like have that consideration for each other and to like build each other up.
I fully agree. And I think, something I would want to ask is, what can people take away from this? And honestly, I think that's kind of it. It's like sensitivity to other people's stories. The gaining experience is not a monolith. We are not all ex-jocks who happen to put on weight and then wind up as this white, hyper-masculine, still somehow presents as a straight dad at 28. Look, we are not all that, and we shouldn't all be that.
For me, having community, like quote unquote community, in the form of my husband was what really helped me finally like ground myself and like come to terms with shit. So like, if somebody posts somebody it's like something online, like pay them a compliment. I mean, it's not it's not gonna take you too long. It's not gonna be like, it doesn't take that much effort, but you never know how much that can mean to somebody else.
Absolutely. And I wanted to add in, because I'm going to bring it up again, the apathy versus empathy. Like, I understand that social situations, yes, they can be very awkward. It's not an easy thing to navigate a room full of strangers for anybody. Even the most gregarious of people still have touches of insecurity when they're around a bunch of people that they don't know. But what I really love about what you have been talking about this whole time is like, you have empathy. You're not apathetic to what it goes on. Like, you are able to say like, I can understand that would be difficult. I can understand where you may be coming from with this. Society breeds so much apathy in us that we get to a point where we're stuck. we're just quagmired in this whole, well, why the hell should I care? I mean, indifference is better than putting all this energy in anyway, isn't it? No, community does not get born out of apathy. It gets born out of being able to empathize with other people, to be able to say, I may not know exactly what you've gone through, but I've been through something myself, and I remember how I felt when it was going on. So I can imagine that it probably felt similar, or maybe it was, like that's how you build community. You don't build it by saying, oh yeah, you went through something. Oh well, I did too. It's really not that big a deal. Can I see your belly? Like what?
100%. Culture is the same thing with humans and animals as it is with bacteria. Culture happens when you have live creatures in a space that interact with each other, and culture is what happens as a result of that interaction. That's how you get a pot of yogurt, and that's also how you make friends. That's the Venn diagram you didn't know you needed, but there you go, kids. That's the lesson. But I think that's it. David. Sorry. David. You have to fold in the cheek. No, sorry. I think.
Why are you acting like a disgruntled pelican?
David, I cannot be any clearer. It says to fold in the cheese. Anyways. David, this has been such a phenomenal experience to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And listen, we probably gonna have you back again, because I know we only touched a little bit on poppers, but I think we're gonna have a whole episode to talk about it. So, where can people find you online?
Well, I'm actually like newly recreated all my presence online in the gainer space. So people can find me on Instagram and on Twitter, same username at growingsnorlax. And yeah, I mean, I'm always looking to make friends, so hit me up, people.
Hit him up. Well, listen, that's it for another week here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. And we want more reviews. Give us those good reviews, girl. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BeefyFrat at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and BeefyFrat at ThiccyMouse. You can also look us up on TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at www.podpage.com/ThiccRadio. If you want to submit a voice note, you can reach us at anchor.fm/ThiccRadio/message. And if you have any questions or ideas for episodes, you can reach us at thethickradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stannnum and Thiccy Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.